I'm very sorry I can't be with you in person today, but I'm delighted to have this opportunity to contribute to your conference electronically, as it were, by just saying a few words about my appreciation really for the work that Positive Money does. I think the debate that Positive Money has started is an incredibly important one. As various banking scandals have highlighted, we all need to better understand the role that money and its creation plays in our economy so we can better hold those with responsibilities to full account. You rightly point out how removing the power to create money from the banks would end the instability that's caused when banks create far too much money in a short period of time. And crucially, it would also ensure that newly created money is spent into the economy so that it can reduce the overall debt burden of the public rather than being lent into existence as happens today. So I especially welcome the emphasis that Positive Money puts on governments using newly created money to deliver wider policy goals, through, for example, increasing spending, paying down the national debt, or replacing taxation revenue in order to reduce taxes. The case I want to make today is that one of the most efficient and productive ways of spending that money into the economy is precisely in investing in the kinds of policies that are associated with what we've called the Green New Deal. In other words, insulating all of our homes, properly investing in renewable energies, really building a green economy. And not only would that be one of the fastest, most effective ways of getting people back into jobs and therefore their taxes back into the revenue as well, it would also help that other forgotten crisis, also beginning with an E, not the economic crisis, but the environmental crisis. Because if we really are headed towards a 6-degree world by the end of this century, then the climate crisis and climate catastrophe is very seriously the greatest threat that we face today. So if I had one plea to the Positive Money conference today, it would be that you look not only at how money is created, but how and where it's spent. In other words, that your analysis is based on both the environmental and the economic crisis. Let me just say a few words about the government's current policies. I've long argued that the government's programme of austerity cuts is not only socially devastating, it's also economically illiterate. That thanks to what Keynes coined the paradox of thrift, to have national and international austerity is in fact utterly counterproductive, a position I know is shared by Positive Money. And that we need a completely different approach based instead on using investment to reduce the deficit and tackling the economic crisis, rather than draining demand out of the economy by cruel and callous cuts that are hitting the poorest hardest, and women and children most of all. Just this week we've had the committee stage of the welfare benefits uprating bill, which the government's own analysis suggests will push 200,000 children into poverty, at the same time, of course, as the richest 2% of earners are given a £3 billion tax cut. According to the Child Poverty Action Group, that means in total coalition policies are set to push 1 million more children into poverty by 2020. Now, not only does that equate to a huge amount of human misery, it is also a totally perverse strategy, because we know that if you put the money into the pockets of the poorest people, they are the ones who will spend it into the local economy, creating jobs and more prosperity. And despite what the Chancellor and others assert, actually we're not broke. We clearly do have a deficit, but that's not the same thing as having no money. The key issue is how money is created and who has it. And let's be very clear that not all investment is equal. What's critical is that investment should deliver quantifiable and tangible benefits for society as a whole. And money spent on key environmental objectives does just that. To avoid runaway climate change, scientists are increasingly recommending limits of carbon dioxide in the environment that will need annual emission reduction here in the UK of about 10% per year from now until 2030. Yet the targets enshrined in the law don't even come close. There is a huge gap between rhetoric about reducing emissions and the reality. Assurances that reducing emissions is a priority barely masks massive efforts to expand fossil fuel extraction, including oil drilling in the Arctic, squeezing of oil from tar sands, fracking to expand extraction of natural gas, and increase mining of coal. Now, governments not only allow this activity, but they use public money, our money, to subsidise fossil fuels at a rate of $500 billion a year. Surely it's time to turn things on their head and ensure that the money in our economy is used to deliver environmental goods, with all the knock-on social and economic benefits that brings, rather than used to fund environmental destruction. The green economy is one of the best places to invest because the green economy is incredibly labour-intensive, far more so than the fossil fuel economy that it replaces. And that's why one of the fastest ways of creating jobs is through investment in renewable energy, energy efficiency, insulating homes, expanding public transport. For example, a recent report from the Renewable Energy Association found that by 2020, with the right investment, the renewable energy sector could support 400,000 jobs here in the UK. Solutions like this help reduce carbon emissions as well as create jobs. In other words, measures designed to address the environmental crisis are precisely how we can get out of the economic crisis as well. And there's another reason why this kind of approach makes sense. Because business as usual is no longer sustainable. We can't do what we have been doing any longer because in the industrialised world, we have reached the limits to growth. It's not possible to exploit our planet at the rate we have been and survive. Already, if everyone in the world aspired to the same production and consumption patterns that we in the rich north have, we'd need 3 planets to provide the resources and absorb the wastes. Well, we only have 1 planet and it's looking pretty degraded. And as Herman Daly puts it, economic growth has in a way already become uneconomic. In other words, the costs of clearing up the social and environmental externalities that growth creates outweighs the value that the process is supposed to produce. Running down resources, cutting down rainforests, spilling oil in the Gulf of Mexico, changing the climate. The bottom line is that we inhabit a planet which has finite physical limits. Our existence depends on the Earth's natural capital, the consumption of which, in many instances, is simply irreversible. Yet our exploitation of this capital continues to accelerate, way beyond the Earth's ability to replenish itself, as we strive to achieve ever higher levels of economic growth. So the mindset we need to develop is one that sees the economy as a wholly owned subsidiary of the planet, not the other way around. We need to build a new macroeconomic model that's geared not towards growth, but towards achieving the outcomes that are important to society and that can be sustained by the planet's finite carrying capacity. It won't be easy, but if we can create an economy to achieve the goal of growth, then we can certainly create an economy that delivers for people and the planet, starting with the agenda that's been set out by positive money. There is no doubt that our financial system and the ecosystems on which we depend are at the point of collapse. We can tackle both problems simultaneously if we would only admit their interdependence. If we only recognise that how we spend money, how we create money, has an impact on our environment, be that a positive one or a negative one. And to end on a positive note, which is appropriate for a Positive Money conference, I hope that this is a relationship that you will put centre stage as you continue your incredibly important campaign for a different system of money creation.